We have now studied target populations, which we can produce in two ways, either letting the model calculate it via the settings in program statistics and fitting the model under fit indicators. There's also a user configuration in the configuration tab that allows the user to load the model target populations into a table, which then can be edited. So at this point, we have a target population that we would like to now use for costing in 1L. So this is the objective number 5, using target populations to cost in the 1L tool. So with the keeping in mind the target population table we have produced, let's study how it is used in One Health. In One Health is an area program and channel analysis. Just to mention that there's not a detailed explanation of what program or channel analysis is. There's a reference to that in the time estimates guide, the document, which explains that, and there would be other sessions on One Health also, which explains that. But what I want to study here is intervention costing. So in this option called target population, which will take a second to load, just give it a moment here. This is now, since I've opened One Health the first time, it's triggering a calculation of all the modules in Spectrum. So this will take a little while to do. So there we go. It opens up this tab, which has the 3 key areas for costing from our perspective in this discussion: target population, population in need, and coverage. So in target population, as I've discussed before, there is a detailed list of types of costing elements to the TV program. So for example, we have diagnostics, and within that we have diagnosis with microscopy, with culture, with expert, with x-rays, or screening with x-rays. We have an area that deals with treatment, so first line treatment, second line treatment. We have patient support, and we have these areas related to latent TB and TB prevention. So there's pre-treatment evaluation, which may involve the screening of a patient or the clinical assessment of a patient. There's testing for latent TB and TB preventive therapy. So all these elements, and each one of them can be linked to a target population from the time estimates model. So for example, diagnosis, if we, one way to cost diagnosis in the passive program would be to link it to the number of new pulmonary bacteriologically confirmed cases, and we do it separately for adults, for children. So dealing first now with adult new pulmonary bacteriologically confirmed cases. So this target population we can see here in the target population table of One Health. It's the adult new pulmonary cases that is going to be linked to this element here. Now, carrying on for this particular intervention, if we look at population in need, so what we see here is default 2000. So what that means is that for every case that is diagnosed, there were 20 cases were assessed, or 20 suspects were assessed and tested with microscopy to find the one case. So in the passive program, we have to account for all the cases that were screened to find this one case, if we're going to work backwards from notified cases. And then finally with coverage, for this intervention, we will have 100%. So those 3 elements, if we combine the adult cases multiplied by here, then the number of tests we have to do to find the one case, the number of suspects we had to test to find the one case, and a coverage of 100% will give us the total number of microscopy tests we needed to do to find one case. That is just for adults, but we have other case types also, children, and we also have monitoring of patients. So here in the monitoring section, for example, here we have monitoring of previously treated cases. So previously treated cases we will find in the in this list. So total, here we go. previously treated cases, including relapse cases. So there is a totals here. If we go into this table again for One Health, that is what will be linked to for that element. So if that option is chosen, previously treated cases including relapse, it will be linked to that number. So we will explicitly see how these numbers appearing in One Health in a second. A few other examples could be here treatment. So we have first-line treatment, new cases, previously treated cases. Again, from the elements in the table, there is a specific section here relating to treatment of initial treatment and previously treated cases, as well as separately for first line and second line. So all those target populations are available in the relevant areas of the costing of the plan. Some other examples that I've talked about before, we have the latent TB, the pre-TPT assessment, those cases, again, separately for different types of pathways like household contacts, high-risk groups, and that's just to recognize that there might be different costs associated with actively going to find these cases. Then there's latent TB testing, and again, those would be the suspects that proceed to eligibility via testing, as opposed to the ones who don't need testing, who are just eligible presumptively. So these are the ones who are tested to be eligible, and then the ones finally eligible for TPT. So all of these elements are set up by default, and the user can either accept that entry or point to something else in the target population table, or can edit these values. There are techniques or methods for specifying a direct entry. So for example, here I accidentally did put direct entry. So direct entry is always an option if none of these categories match exactly the intention of the user. And the next thing, of course, to pay attention to then is the population in need. So for some of the interventions like diagnosis, where we work backwards from notified cases, have pins that represent the number needed to test. For monitoring, we have a number of tests during the monitoring period, so those have to be included, and so on. So all of these have defaults that we think are realistic, but of course can be edited. Coverage will be 0 when for the user first opens the table. So here I have just put in some examples so we can look at some figures. So the place where the target populations will explicitly appear in One Health is in the results. So in the results, there is a number of services. So indeed, we are trying to calculate the number of services, which is then multiplied by a unit cost to ultimately calculate the cost. So when we generate this table, number of services, which now will, I'm going to present it as a table where I can then clearly see these elements. So each one of these you can locate in the target population table. So here we have new adult pulmonary cases. So you can find that entry in here. Remember though that we are dealing with the pin setting of 20 or 2000%. That is also multiplied here. These are just some examples. For example, here we have previously treated cases monitoring. So if we look at that one, previously treated, so we'll find that entry here as well. So that is multiplied by 3, of course. So it's this one multiplied by 3. Because there are 3 tests during the monitoring phase. So here's some other examples. Here we have basically the total number treated either with MDR for first line or for second line, and that we can find here in this section of the table. And similarly for all these TB elements, TPT elements, they can also be found directly in the table, depending on what the coverage is. So And another example to point out could be this one where we active TB case finding. So active TB case finding in children and adults is coming also from this table. It's the total number of adults and or children that could be screened, that was specified to be screened in the active screening program. So this is the TPT program. Again, going back to program statistics. It's the TPT program, and for each of these algorithms or cascades, at the end, we specify the proportion that is screened for TB and the proportion of them that are linked to treatment. So in this case, I've specified 5% of the cases will be screened for active TB. This is now separate also from the screening for latent TB and the treatment for latent TB. These are the cases that were actually screened for active TB. So that starts in 2021, and we can see that here in this table of services, where according to the coverage setting that I've used, these are the numbers that will be screened actively for either children or adults, and we can specify whether we use microscopy or expert, for example, which would be typical, or X-rays for screening. So, and combinations of that. So it's up to the user to specify the distribution of diagnostic methods for the active case find. What I do want to point out, though, is that those actively found cases are removed from the total number projected via the routine screening program. Otherwise, we would be double counting them. So if we go to program statistics, those actively screened cases, which can be many, if we have a large active screening program with high percentage tested for active TB, it will be a large number. Those numbers are removed from the total notification strain. Otherwise, we would be double counting them. So that's why this number here in the target population table is decreasing. It's because of the increasing in active case finder. And we can see that here in this table, where we have a big drop in, for example, microscopy testing in the passive program by an increase in the active screening program. But that's all a function of, this was just an example. It will depend entirely on the local context of the country the user is studying. So this is explicitly the link between target populations that we produce either from the model or via user editing in the estimates model, and the elements of program or channel analysis, where we've now linked those target populations directly to specific interventions in either the screening program, which is split by diagnostic method, or in the patient, in the treatment, first line or second line treatment, patient support, and TPT sections. So each of these has a corresponding target population, which is explicitly linked. The user can also choose to ignore that link and put a table, an option here to directly edit the number. We multiply that with the population in need, and that accounts for different things like monitoring frequency, or in the case of diagnosis in the passive program, it accounts for the number that we need to test to find the case. And then, of course, coverage, which could also be used to control for different things. For example, it could be used to split the test of cases up between different diagnostic methods, and so on. So that concludes our discussion of objective 5.